Thank you once again, everybody, for joining us tonight. And it's great to see all of you that have come back for part 3 of our June Caring with Melanie series. And thank you for those of you who have watched the videos. Tonight, we're going to be speaking about hallucinations and delusions. I do want to thank our sponsors for this series. We have Gallbirth Health, Acadia, Aware Senior Care, and ESI. And we want to thank those sponsors for helping us make this happen. And of course, thank all of you for taking time out of your busy caregiving schedules to join us. So without further ado, Melanie, I'm just going to turn it right over to you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And I am so glad to be with you. It seems like this 6 o'clock time when we talked last week, this 6 o'clock time was a good time. And it looks like we've got a good number of people here today. So I'm glad to be spending dinner with you. So thank you for joining me and for being here about something that is really hard and often really scary. And like a lot of things with dementia, it's not just hard and scary for the person living with dementia, although it definitely is that. It's definitely hard and it's scary for the person living with dementia. It's also really hard and scary for that family care partner or for that professional caregiver or for that neighbor or for that person in the community or for that person. So let me just start by asking, has anybody ever been with somebody, maybe your person living with dementia or maybe somebody in your work who was having a hallucination or a delusion? And we'll kind of talk about, we'll define those and talk about them in a little bit. But let's just kind of start by talking about, has anybody ever experienced that? Or maybe had a hallucination or a delusion themselves? So what kinds of, has anybody ever had that experience? And would you be comfortable with kind of telling us what happened?
One of my clients once had, well, quite often, um, and she always liked children. And one day she wanted me to look out the window to see all the children that were playing in her yard. And with her Alzheimer's, uh, I figured, okay. And because I'm, from my training, if it's not unsafe, go with it. And so I asked her, I said, is there any little girl with red hair? Because I have red hair. And she said, no, nobody has red hair. And I said, oh, that's too bad. Maybe next time when they come back, there'll be one with red hair. You just, mhm.
So you just kind of let go and go with the flow. So everybody say that with me. Let go and go with the flow.
Yeah.
Let go and go with the flow. And when that flow is kind of, everybody kind of do this with me. That flows kind of like this, and it's interesting, and we're curious, and things, it just kind of is entertaining. Going with that flow is absolutely the right thing to do. So thanks for sharing that story. And that's a beautiful story of someone who saw something that wasn't scary, it wasn't unpleasant, and thank you for kind of holding me accountable for that. That was one that wasn't scary, it wasn't unpleasant, it was entertaining, and it was kind of made sense, and it kind of worked well with her life. And so that's a beautiful story of an example of let go and go with the flow in that moment. So thank you for starting us out with that story. That's a beautiful story, Anne. And so you and this lady had this moment of connection, this moment of togetherness, this moment of joy, kind of watching children play. Dementia created the situation. Dementia created that lady seeing something that wasn't there, but Anne made it a moment of joy. So for the other people in the group, what did Anne do that kind of made it a moment of joy, made it okay? What did you notice that Anne did that kind of made it okay, made it a moment of joy in that situation?
She kind of agreed that there were children out there and she was enjoying them just as much as the client was. Like you say, you have to go with the flow, because if you argue that those aren't there, that is going to make them even more certain that there is something there.
So that's a great distinction, Suzanne, that she agreed with her and she asked some questions about the children. And just like Anne made it turn really beautiful or made it into a beautiful moment, it could have gone downhill just as quickly if Anne had tried to do something different. If Anne had taken the logical, reasonable part of her brain and headbutted her client and said, there are not children out there. We talk about this every day. It could have gone so completely badly. So thanks to Anne for sharing that story. And thanks to Suzanne for pointing out the beauty in Anne's response to that story. So thank y'all for sharing that. I'm going to go back and look at some of, I see a lot of other things. So let me see what else is in there. So someone said she's pregnant. Um, Erica was telling us about one of her residents said she's pregnant and she just had the baby. And I had a lady tell me, oh, I'm in labor. Oh, I'm in labor. Oh, Lord, the baby's coming. The baby's coming. We got her to the bathroom and she took care of business and the labor pains went away and she was really happy. And thankfully, we had a doll that she could hold on. She wasn't really happy about having the baby in the toilet. You know, that really wasn't what she wanted to do. But I assured her that it was going to be okay. She went and she had her bowel movement. And then the rest of the day, she carried around the baby. So another example how that was. Somebody seeing a snake under the dining room table. Now that one's not quite so nice. That one's not something, especially if it's around mealtime, or if it's around it's inside. I don't want snakes inside my house. So that could give a little bit different texture, a little bit different response from the care partner and from the person living with dementia. And someone else mentions there were hallucinations and Lewy body dementia. That's one of the diseases that is highly associated with hallucinations. We're actually going to talk a little bit about how they're a little different later on. And it went all the way through. They started infrequently and then they became more and more daily by the time that he passed. So that's another good thing to think about as we're thinking about dementia. Someone, it says she always speaks to her son. So Erica, I need a little bit more from, I think maybe I lost a connection with that. What did I lose where you were speaking to someone's son? Where was that connected to? Another one, she's pregnant and she just had a baby. And so the baby was a son. And so you always had to be, yeah, the very last thing you want to do is if someone has something and they think it's a baby to just kind of take it and dump it in a chair. You don't want to do that. That's really not very friendly. That doesn't work. Something about Alzheimer's disease and that she'd brushed her teeth with poison and that was really scary and would really make you not want to brush your teeth. And we're knowing that toothbrushing is really, really important to overall health. Someone else dropped in the chat, there are people in the house and a secret girlfriend and that you were hurting people and things don't make sense and this is really terrible and scary. And then another one that someone hit it and it became a real thought somebody had hit them and it became a real challenge. So those other kinds of things, that someone is sneaking into her apartment and moving things around and there's an animal. So we have a lot of things to talk about. So I am so reassured that I am with a group of people who understand what it is that when we talk about hallucinations and delusions. So I'm going to share my screen, and oops, that's not where I went to go. I meant to go here. I'm going to share my screen, and that's what, thankfully, we are here to talk about the same thing. So let's go ahead and get started. So a little bit about definitions, because sometimes we use some of these words a little bit interchangeably. So the first definition is hallucination. And again, we're going to come and talk back about these a little bit more detail. Hallucinations are a sensory experience. So that means it's something that you see, or something that you hear, or something that you taste, or something that you smell, or something that you feel. So it really, you're feeling, you're smelling, you're tasting, you're touching, you're hearing, you're seeing, and it's not there. So the experience is there's something that is happening, and the reality is it's not there. Now that gets really overlapping, confusing, misinterpreted often as illusions. And illusions are misinterpreting something that is there. So an illusion is seeing something that is there, but really not exactly understanding what it is. So for example, I had a lady who said there were snakes on a lot of, and I don't know why. I guess because a lot of people have snake phobias, but there are a lot of snakes in hallucinations. I've had people see snakes, people hear snakes, people feel snakes. I've never had anybody talk about tasting or smelling snakes, but it could be. It could happen next week. But seeing and hearing and feeling, snakes are a really common kind of one. So I had a lady, there were snakes in her room. They were all over the floor. I was standing at the door. She wouldn't let me come in. She was up on the bed like this with the covers pulled up. She said, no, no, don't come in. Don't come in. The snakes will get you. Please don't come in. They'll get you. They'll get you. They'll get you. And so what I was able to notice from where I was that the air conditioner was on and there was a vent in the floor, and she had vertical blinds. So what was happening is the air was blowing up, the sun was coming in. So what kind of shadows were being cast on the floor? What did those shadows on the floor look like to her?
A vertical curly cues. Mm-hmm.
And her brain, which, to tell you the truth, it got me for a minute. Because what did I see? Wavy lines on the floor that were kind of moving. So was that really hallucination, or was that more of an illusion? You can drop it in the chat, or you can just call it out. Was that a hallucination? Was there something there that she was misunderstanding, or was there really nothing there? Yeah, it was an illusion. So she was seeing something that wasn't there. Okay, so now I'm in this situation. The air conditioner is coming up, the lights coming through, the snakes are wiggling and moving. What she doesn't want me to come in, because she was the most kind, loving, protective person. She didn't want me to come in because she didn't want me to get bitten by the snakes, but she didn't want to get bitten by the snakes. So what do you think I did to fix it?
Close the blinds.
I couldn't get to the blinds
Oh,
because the snakes were between me and the blinds, because I thought about it. What did I do?
well, I would have told her, I would have thanked her for warning me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I probably would have tried to get her out of the room. I want to keep you safe. Come on, let's get you out of here so that I can call the exterminator and have him come and get the snakes.
And that's a great approach. And you know, because your goal is to get her somewhere where she feels safe, we can deal with the problem. I took a different approach. I cut the air conditioner off.
Oh, yeah.
Because what happened when I cut the air conditioner off?
Stopped waving.
The blinds stopped waving, and then there wasn't, so now they're just lines, so the snakes were dead. I went and closed the blinds real quick and turned the air conditioner back on because it was July in North Carolina. And you did not want to leave the air conditioner off very long when it's July in North Carolina. So a couple of different approaches. Did they both work, or could they both have worked?
Probably.
Yeah. So thinking about those illusions are things that can be misunderstood, misinterpreted. So we've talked about hallucinations. We've talked about illusions and kind of the differences between those. And the third one are delusions. And delusions are a false, fixed belief. So it's something that isn't true. It's also, that's what delusions and hallucinations share, is they're not true. Your husband really isn't cheating on you. People really aren't coming into your house, moving things around and stealing your money. Those things really aren't happening. They really aren't filling the dog with the gas, and there really aren't sensors all over the house. So those are delusions. They're false views. They stay across time. So it's not a one-time thing. It's a thing that stays across time. But here's what the most important thing is whether they're delusions or whether they're hallucinations, for that person living with dementia, they are just as true as the fact that Anne has red hair. So for that person who's having that hallucination, or that person who's having a delusion, they believe it just as much as you believe what you believe. And so it doesn't help me if I'm worried to have someone say, calm down. So have you ever had calm down, calm you down? Has that ever worked for anybody? Show me thumbs up or thumbs down. Yeah, calm down. Never, ever, ever in the history of the world has worked with calm down. Never, never has it made you calm down. So let's go back to if calm down isn't work, we've got to figure out something else to kind of figure out. So let's start with thinking about these different types of dementias and what tends to happen. So I put the umbrella in because I wanted to point out that all of these dementias under this category have potential to have hallucinations and delusions. They all do, because when your brain starts to disconnect, when brain cells start to die, when things start to change in your brain, you are at high risk for seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, and smelling things that aren't there. You're at high risk for misunderstanding things that are there, and you're at high risk for misinterpreting and having these false fixed beliefs. But some of these are particularly high risk. And the one that is particularly high risk for hallucinations are Lewy body dementia. And in fact, that's part often, one of the first things that I see is mobility changes and these hallucinations. And for that person with Lewy body, those hallucinations are real. It's also true. And somebody dropped about their family member um, with Lewy body dementia. For people with Alzheimer's disease, often what happens is they have hallucinations for a little bit, but then they resolve and they go away. For people with Lewy body, they can start and they can continue throughout the course of the disease. So dealing with them with Lewy body is really different than dealing with them with Alzheimer's. With Alzheimer's, it's really short term. With Lewy body, it's going to go on for quite a little bit, for potentially for the whole time of dementia. Alzheimer's disease, those delusions is where we're really going to see a lot of those changes. And for frontal temporal lobe dementia and for vascular dementia, it can really go either way. So let's start to kind of dig in a little bit with these hallucinations. Now, it can be any sense, but if we look back to the ones that were kind of the hallucinations that were listed, we had Anne tell us about her person who was seeing children. We have someone else who was having hallucinations. It didn't say specifically. Somebody else was seeing snakes. So a lot of seeing kind of stuff is what I'm seeing mostly in the chat. And that's exactly what I would expect, because most hallucinations are visual, and the kinds of things that people tend to see are often people. People see adults for some reason, and I don't know why. A lot of people see children, and that's a real common one, and then animals and things like that. Some people, particularly with Lewy body, some people will see a hallucination and they'll know it's there. I was doing a home visit with a lady, and I went to see her, and I was sitting next to her, and she crossed her arms across her chest, and she gave a big sigh, and she said, "Melanie, that man who isn't there is standing right in front of the TV." And so she was seeing a man. He was standing right in front of the TV. She knew that there wasn't a man standing in front of the TV, but she couldn't see the TV through the man. So it was just as real to her as the absence of the man was real to me. So a lot of people do see things. Some people hear things, and some of the things that people were writing kind of sound like maybe they are hearing things. And some of the sounds that people hear, a lot of times people will hear music, and a lot of times people will hear conversations. And for my people with dementia, you can drop in there or unmute if you've seen something different. A lot of times what people describe to me is they can hear the voices, hear the conversations, but they can't really understand the words or what people are saying. So I'm going to ask somebody who has had family members with auditory hallucinations from dementia, or had residents with auditory hallucinations with dementia. Is that what y'all have seen as well, or something different? Do people hear really clear words and phrases, or is it kind of like a muffled conversation that you can't really get a grip on what's being said? What is your experience been? Is that kind of, you can thumbs up, that's kind of similar to what you've heard, or my people hear very clearly what they're supposed to hear? Muffled. I wish they would just say what they want to say. If they would just tell me what they want me to do, I would do it. And this tends to be a little different than the kinds of auditory hallucinations that people with schizophrenia hear, because they often do hear very clearly what people are saying. And for my people living with dementia, it often is kind of muffled, kind of like they can hear the conversation but can't pick out the words. And it might not be an auditory hallucination. I had a lady who would come to visit her mom with dementia, and her mom would say, "Sweetheart, if you would just take me to the beach, just take me to the beach. It's right outside my door. I would just love to see the beach one more time. Sweetheart, I don't know why you won't just take me to the beach. I can hear it. I can hear it. It's right out there. I can hear it. It's right out there." Um, and so this would go on, and the lady would get distressed. And so finally, what we did is we went in the room one day, sat down in the room, and closed our eyes. And what I heard was the noise of the radiator. And guess what the radiator sounded like? The radiator sounded like the ocean. And so what we started doing was, again, turning off the radiator while the daughter was visiting, so she didn't get so distressed about her daughter not taking her to go hear the ocean. Now, somebody put in the full conversations and hallucinations, and that's possible. You know, my experience has been that's not as common, but maybe other people have different experiences from me. um and someone who thinks the pictures on the wall are real and has conversations with them. I had a lady who thought the pictures in on her dresser were real, and she would bring food for the children. So when she would finish her meals, she would pick out a few pieces of food and go and put them in front of the photographs in her room for the children. And she was very convinced that the children would eat the food because the food would disappear. And so she became very convinced that she had to feed the children. And we were able to kind of support that and able to kind of make that happen. Now, somebody else is putting in there the people on TV. So that is another kind of misinterpretation that people think what's happening. And that's kind of a frontal lobe thing, which is really separating reality from fantasy, separating dreams from reality. So those are people who see what's happening on TV, think there really are people in the house fighting. And so being really careful about what those environmental kind of triggers are can be really important, because we don't have to have those people, because we can get rid of the people on the TV. We can get rid of the people on TV if they're distressing. If they're not distressing, we'll let them come visit. If they're not a problem, we'll let them hang out with us. If they're a problem, then we might need to deal with them. So if they're stealing things and destroying property, that's a different situation, because those people are dangerous and those people are scary. So we've got to deal with those people in a little bit of a different kind of way. So we've talked about visual hallucinations. We've talked about auditory hallucinations. Some people also feel things, and it seems, going back to those snakes, what do you think the things are that people start to feel on their skin? What do you think people feel on their skin sometimes?
Bugs.
Bugs is a real common one. So I've had, bugs in all capitals. Lisa's not a big bug person. I can see her cringing. And I've actually had people that the reason I got involved, I'm a nurse, the reason I got involved was because they had scratched so much that they actually had messed up their skin and had scabs and scars from scratching, trying to get rid of those things that were crawling on them, things that people are smelling. I've had people smell gas. I've had people smell spoiled food. When the food isn't spoiled, it smells fine. Or people tasting and tasting blood. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, what some of that tasting kinds of things might be. So these hallucinations are real for the person. And there are a lot of kind of themes. So people and kids and animals being broken in, things being crawling, strange taste and smells. Kind of mentioned this, people with Alzheimer's disease, which is what AD stands for, Alzheimer's disease. It's usually pretty short term. It's usually you can get through a couple of weeks or a month, and then it doesn't kind of hang around forever. With Lewy body, it can go on through the end of life. And one of the challenges is really trying to understand from a science perspective what's creating these hallucinations. And we really don't exactly know specifically. It might be related. There's a lot of information that seems to be focusing it on this visual spatial part of the brain. So I'm going to stop sharing this for just a minute. I'm going to show you another photo real quick that's just of that part of the brain where that visual spatial part is. And you'll be able to see why processing in that part of the brain is not going to be as good. So this is the occipital lobe, which is back here. Normal healthy person has all of this tissue to process, and the person who is at the end of dementia only has that much tissue to process. And as the brain is disconnecting, things are still firing, but they're not connecting in the right place. It gets really confusing. Are you seeing what you think you're seeing? Are you seeing something different? Are you seeing something that's not there? The chemicals in the brain may be firing. The electrical systems in the brain may be firing. The brain cells themselves aren't able to kind of keep up and keep organized with what's really going on. So it might be that visual spatial kinds of changes that are going. It might be memory. There's actually something called false memories where people bring things together that really didn't happen, and those kind of are often getting layered in with hallucinations and delusions and some of those kinds of issues as well. Maybe it's coming from the part of the brain that controls not hearing, but I mean, not vision, but the part of the brain that controls hearing. Maybe it's coming from the part of the brain that works with smelling and tasting, or that sensory motor strip. Maybe it's coming from medication. So this is one that is kind of like an illusion. There are medications that create changes in hearing, changes in taste. So there are actually hallucinations that create, they're actually medications that create almost a metallic sense, almost a metallic taste. And so one of the things I might do if someone is having these type of hallucinations might be talk with my primary care provider or talk with my pharmacist about, could this be a side effect from a medication? Because they can have that metallic taste, which many people will misinterpret as tasting like blood. That metallic taste, tasting like blood. I've been eating blood. People put blood in my mouth, those kinds of things. It might be delirium, where people are, their brain is disconnecting from a chemical perspective. So that could be related to medication, but that could also be related to being dehydrated. That might be related to not getting enough sleep. That might be related to all different kinds of things that might be interfering with the way the brain works. So what can you do? Well, my very first thing is check it out. And the reason I became a big fan of checking it out is when I was first learning how to do validation and empathetic communication, a lady came to me and she said, "There's a man under my bed." And I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. There's a man under your bed. Tell me about that." And she said, "Well, he's been in there all day. I want to go take a nap, and I'm not going to go sleep in a bed when there's a man lying underneath the bed." I said, "Oh, I don't blame you for that at all. I wouldn't want to sleep on a bed where there's a man underneath the bed. That doesn't sound very comfortable. I don't think I could rest very well in that situation either." And so I walked to her room with her, and guess what? There was a man under her bed. And so sometimes what people are saying, sometimes people will say there's a leak in the ceiling, and you walk in the room and there's a stinking leak in the ceiling. So really check it out. See if there is something that is actually there. See if there is something that could be misinterpreted, an illusion, and get some more information about what are the medications. So go in and look at it through the eyes of the person living with dementia. Go in and listen through the ear changes, the hearing changes of someone living with dementia, and really see, is there really a man under the bed? Because I never know. Sometimes there's really a man under the bed. What can you do? And this kind of comes into, I put it kind of in two categories. So one category I did was validate the experience and the emotions. So when Anne was telling us about the children who were playing, oh, you've always loved children. Children, it's so much fun to watch children this time. It's so wonderful that kids can be outside playing. I love that the days are longer. So kind of validate those emotions and those experiences. If it's not a positive hallucination or a delusion, a hallucination, then I validate the feelings. I can tell you're really worried. You're really scared. You are really frustrated. You're really mad. I'm so sorry. You are absolutely right. This should not be happening. It's not okay for there to be snakes in your room. I am so sorry. That is not right. That's not the way it should be. But I'm not going to, I say with people, so one of the very first things I said was go with the flow. And I believe in going with the flow, but I'm not a believer in making the flow. So I want you to go with the flow, but I don't want you to make the flow. So I don't want to say, yes, the snakes are huge. They're copperheads and boa constrictors. And yeah, we've got to get out of here. Let's go call the, I'm not going to make the flow. So that validate the emotions, validate the experience. I'm not going to, if the person says to me, don't you see them? They're right there. I'm going to say, I can't see them, but I can tell that you can. And I trust you. So let's get out of here. If you're seeing snakes in here, I trust you. I know you're seeing what you're seeing. I don't want to be in here when somebody's seeing snakes. Let's go away. Let's go find somewhere better to be. So let's get out of here. So then kind of finding some ways, you validate the emotions of the experience and then give some reassurance for what you're able to do. So maybe what you say is, I know things are really scary. It's out of control. Things aren't feeling right. I'm going to stay with you. And between the two of us, we've always been able to get through everything. Between the two of us, we're going to figure out how to manage this, how to make this work. Um, Check it out with them. You know what? Let's go look. I'm going to go check that door right there and make sure that door is locked. Come with me. Let's just go check. We checked it. That door is locked. Let's shake the door. I think this door is safe. I think we're okay with this door tonight. We need to make sure we check it every night. But I think right now for night, I think this door is safe. And sometimes, if we can't leave the space, if we can't, sometimes we tell the thing to go away. Get out of here. I'm not putting up with this. I don't want my mama afraid. Just get out of here. If we can't get out, you get out. And then the next thing that you can do is to change the environment. And so I have a thing I say, make the problem smaller. And part of what you can do to make the problem smaller with hallucinations is to get rid of things that are contributing. So maybe what's contributing is I wake up in the middle of the night and the room is really dark. And so it feels like the dark is falling on me. So maybe I want to change something to make the room feel safer. Maybe there are a lot of things that look kind of scary. And so maybe I'm not seeing that thing as scary, but it's creating a scary environment, a scary sense in this space. So maybe I can get rid of some of those things that seem kind of scary. Maybe I want to change what's going on with the lighting. Maybe we need some night lights, or maybe we need a light on, or maybe we need, I actually have had, been trying headlamps with a couple of people at night, because the thing about headlamps is they don't make the room bright, they make where you're looking bright. And so I've actually worked with those with a couple of people to see if they make people feel safer. And I'm not saying universally everybody go buy headlights and things will be good. But it seems like they've been helpful for a couple of people in a couple of situations. I'm going to get rid of things like closing curtains and closing doors and closing blinds, and thinking about those hallucinations, illusion kinds of things. Mirrors and shiny surfaces are one of the big challenges for hallucinations. And I put in there, let's leave here and go somewhere. And then also sometimes what we can do is we can actually put something else into place. So maybe what I want to do is, if somebody's having auditory hallucination, maybe I want to put on some music, that maybe music with headphones that kind of helps cover that up. Maybe even with visual hallucinations, if I put on music that makes people feel calm and safe, sometimes those kinds of things can help. So let's move on to delusions. And delusions are just as complicated as hallucinations. But the reality is, a lot of the things we've talked about for hallucinations are going to help us with delusions as well. So delusions, those false fixed beliefs, we've talked about that. I kind of think of delusions as a way for the person living with dementia to try to make the world on the outside match the world on the inside. So let me explain what I mean by that. If I'm a person living with dementia and I've always been very careful with my possessions, I've always kept up with my purse, I've always kept up with my keys. Now I've got dementia. I can't keep up with my purse. I can't keep up with my keys. I either have to say, I have become an irresponsible person who can't remember anything, or I can say, people are taking my stuff. People are moving my stuff around. Somebody's coming in here. So I either have to change my vision of myself, or I have to figure out a way to make the world match up. And I think it's a combination of, or an interaction between who people have always been. So there are some people, and y'all probably know these people as well, that the world has never really felt safe. You know, the world has always felt a little bit dangerous. And so they interpreted that with the world is even less safe now. So there was poisoning and there's stealing and there's cheating and there's all this stuff. So I had a lady who had a very traumatic childhood. She grew up in the Depression, when there wasn't any food, there wasn't any money. Her family ran a store. And so some of her earliest memories in the 30s are of people breaking into the store, you know, of being asleep upstairs over the store and people breaking into the store, stealing the money, stealing the food. So that's how she grew up. Her young life was her dad running down the steps with a shotgun to run people out of their house. Now, would that damage you? You can go, yes. Would that impact you as a human being? Yes. And so when she grew older, she was living in her house by herself, and she kept all the blinds down, all the doors locked, slept on her couch facing the front door with a shotgun in her hand. So her children were scared to go over to her house. You know, we had a little bit of this in my family. My grandmother used to sleep with a pistol under her pillow. She lived way out in the country. The dogs would bark. My uncle said she was the safest woman in Nash County because everybody in Nash County knew that my grandmama had a pistol under her pillow and Parkinson's disease. And so she was the safest woman in Nash County because she wasn't afraid to use it. So that idea that of people trying, it's not that they're, if you change it around from they don't love me, they don't trust me, to they're trying to make sense from the world. And she's always been suspicious. She's never felt like there was enough. He's never felt secure. He's never felt like he was enough. Then these ways of interpreting the world kind of begin to make sense a little bit. So what can you do about these delusions? Because they get really complicated, and nobody wants their person to be living in a state of fear, to be living in a state of betrayal, to be living in a state of anger or frustration or suspiciousness. We don't want that. So what can you do? Well, as hard as it is and as painful as it is, keep the connection, especially if it's personal. So if that person is accusing you, or that person is accusing your son, or if that person is accusing your parent, you know, your father is accusing your mother of having an affair. I had a lady stand right up in church and yell at the organist and say, I know you're effing my husband every Saturday night, and walking in here, and that was in the church, and she came right out with it. You know, I know you're doing this every Saturday night and standing there, and I sit on this corner of the church because I know God is going to strike you dead one of these Sundays. And it was so real for her. So if that's your mom accusing your dad of cheating with the church organist, it gets hard to not take that personally. I would take that personally. If your parent or if your resident or your patient is accusing you or your staff of stealing from them, it's hard not to take that personally. When you know how hard people are working and how much you're sacrificing as a family member, it's hard not to take that personally. But keeping that connection is your best chance at helping that person not feel betrayed and pushed away. So magic words, magic words, magic words. So important. I'm going to ask you to say them after me. I'm sorry. Say them with me. I'm sorry. Say them with me. I'm so sorry. I'm so very sorry. Because the reality is, aren't you sorry that the person is in this much distress? Aren't you sorry that this person who's worked so hard for their money, has been so careful with their money? Aren't you sorry that now they think the people that they love and trust are coming to them and taking that? Aren't you sorry? Yeah, you're really sorry that they're going through that, that they're feeling that as well. So make those connections, keep those connections. Saying I'm sorry. I really hate that you feel like this is happening. I really hate that you feel like this is the way um things are going. I really hate that you feel like your money is being stolen. You've always been so careful with the money. It's going to sound like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, because it's finding that balancing line of being able to validate that person's feelings with a delusion, but not validating the facts. So if that person says, your daddy is cheating on me, and you say, yes, he is, I saw him with the huzzy tramp, then that's really not helpful, because that's not going to help him. That's not going to help her. So you don't feel like you can trust mom. That must be really scary, because, and then I move into I remembers. And there's a huge difference between an I remember and a don't you remember. And I remember is, I remember when this happened, and you came home late from work because you were planning a surprise party for mom, and she got really worried, and I remembered that she said she thought you were, and then we move into I remembers, and you know what, it all turned out okay. So moving into some I remembers instead of some don't you remembers, probably for, especially for family care partners, but for professional care partners as well. It's incredibly hard not to try to force the logic and reason. I'm going to offer logic and reasoning. I'm going to say, oh, you're worried about your money. Let's go look at your, oh, here's your banking account. You know, to me, it looks like this is a reasonable amount of money. I'm going to offer that. I'm going to offer that. I'm going to provide that, but I'm not going to force that. Because when we get into trouble with these delusions is when we force, because if we figure out together that things are okay, then it's not that I'm telling you that you're wrong. It's that we're figuring out together it's okay. So I'm not going to force the logic and the reasoning and the explaining. I'm going to sort of offer that. So, you know, you're worried about money. You've always been really careful about money. Let's go look at your online banking. So I'm looking at your, okay, this is today's date. You know, it looks like things are okay. Is there something here that doesn't look right to you? Okay, so that maybe somebody fixed it. So maybe it was a bank mistake and it's fixed. Does this look all right to you? It looks all right. Okay, thank goodness, because you've always been so good with money. Now, that is when it goes really well. It may not always go really well. That may not always really work. I'm not going to force that. I'm going to offer that. If we don't get to the place where it's comforting, I'm not going to keep pushing it and forcing it. I'm going to try to do things that give that person living with dementia as much control as I can. So I'm gonna, would you rather do this or do this? You're worried about the money. Would you rather talk to someone at the bank, or do you want to look at it on the computer? You know, you're worried about um, the food. You're confused. You're afraid somebody's trying to poison you. Oh, I'm so sorry. Would food from a restaurant feel safer, or would food from the grocery store feel safer? So I'm going to try to give them as much control as I can. And then I'm going to try to reduce the risk. And I put extras there. So extras, by extras, what I mean is if something works, get extras. So if I think somebody's stealing my purse, or if I think somebody's stealing my money, I'm going to keep extra money around. So if someone thinks that I had $20 and I put that $20 right there on my bedroom table where I always put it, I always keep my money right there. I've got another. When was the last time you saw me with this much cash, Lisa? I never have cash. I got this just for this session. So I couldn't get it anyway. So I always keep this $20 and it's not there. And so I've got a $20 bill in my pocket. And when I bend down and I look under the dresser, oh, Mom, look, here's $20 I found under the dresser. So I kind of find extra. So maybe it's an extra purse, or maybe it's some extra money, or maybe it's an extra. I'm gonna also, here's one that we get really bad about, which is acting suspicious. So if Lisa is my sister and we're worried about my mom, the tendency is when I see Lisa, is the two of us huddle. So kind of lean over and huddle with me, Lisa. So kind of lean over, and we're over here talking, and we're glancing at Mom every once in a while to see if she's looking. So we're looking and acting really suspicious, and that just really builds that sense of there's something to be worried about. And I'm a nurse, so I can say this: nurses are sometimes the worst, because what we'll do is we'll take medication and we'll crush it up and we'll mix it up in applesauce, and we'll go up to the person and we say, Lisa, here's your applesauce. And Lisa finds little pieces of crap in her applesauce, and now or her yogurt or her pudding, and now she thinks I'm trying to poison her. And you can see why she thinks I'm trying to poison her, because I'm giving her applesauce that's got little pieces of crap in it. That's not very good. So avoiding those suspicious kinds, hiding things, keeping things, looking suspicious, acting suspicious. Somebody calls on the phone, I look at the number and I walk out of the room. You know, that can make you think that I'm talking about you. Sometimes even eating in restaurants, people will think other people are talking about them. So I've just eaten in the car with people sometimes. And if it's personal, I kind of mentioned this at the beginning, if it's personal, really get yourself some support, because there's something about when you're trying hard, when you're working hard, when you're investing a lot, and you get accused of stealing or cheating or lying or poisoning or any of those things, finding some support is mandatory. You know, whether that support is through support groups, whether it's through friends who get it, whether it's through counseling, being really careful that your counseling, your therapy is with someone who gets dementia, because with people living with dementia, some of the traditional therapy kinds of things, like setting limits and stuff, really aren't going to work. So being really careful about that. And lastly, medications. And it would be so incredibly easy if we could just take a pill and have it be okay. The challenge is sometimes medications are what's causing the problem, because it can be delusion, or it can be some adverse sensory. Some medications will make your skin really dry, or your skin feel itchy. So, after I make sure the skin is well lubricated, we check the medications to make sure those things aren't going on underneath. We have to have that conversation about, is the risk benefit right for medications? Now, the antipsychotics are the ones we use most for hallucinations and delusions. They have a lot of adverse reactions with them. They have a lot of mobility problems can be associated with them. Sleepiness and drowsiness can be associated with them. We really want to be thoughtful and intentional about when to use them, when not to use them. The cholinesterase inhibitors, so sometimes help with some of those um, hallucinations and delusions as well. And then there's one drug that's been approved for Parkinson's disease for hallucinations and delusions. So coming to the end of this time, old time goes so quickly. Time goes so quickly. I hope you've got something. Being careful with those medications, asking a lot of questions for everybody, providing that support. It's just as wrong not to manage hallucinations that are scary with medications as it is to wrong to try to overmanage things that don't need to be managed. So I'm going to finish with one little story. I had a lady who, her hallucinations were, she saw gremlins with blood dripping from their fangs walking around her bedroom, the ceiling. And so I tried so many different things. I tried changing the room. I tried having her sitting, sleeping up. I tried um, a different lighting. I tried so many things, so many things. I finally wound up giving her a little bit of an antipsychotic because she was in such fear. The gremlins turned into elves, and the elves didn't have blood. And so we gave her that medication for a while, and then we tapered it down as her disease progressed. So I am out of time. Time with you goes so quickly, my friend. So thank you for spending this hour with me. If I can help you with anything, I think Lisa's given you some directions that you can send her emails and she'll get them to me. If I can help you with anything, let me know. I will send her the PowerPoint. It'll probably actually be tomorrow, Lisa, because I've got something else I've got to get done tonight, and then she will get it out to you. And have a wonderful evening.
Thank you so much, Melanie, for so much information in a tiny little amount of time. I did share my email address, and you all have it associated with the invitation you got for tonight's meeting. If you have additional questions we weren't able to answer, please email us and we will get answers for you. Again, we'd like to thank our sponsors for tonight, Galbraith Health, Acadia, Eastside, and Aware Senior Care, and most especially all of you and Melanie for joining us for this three-part series. We are recording, so you will get the link to this along with Melanie's slides and maybe some other information we'll share with you as well. If you have other ideas for topics you'd like us to discuss in these sessions, please let us know. And once again, thank you all for your time. We hope you have a great evening or afternoon, depending on where you're coming from. And again, thank you so much, Melanie. We appreciate you.